The sky above the training world of Velis 9 was a constant shade of bruised violet, an artificial atmosphere designed to look like eternal dusk. It had hung that way for over a century, unchanged, unmoving. For 112 years, the siege simulation had never been broken. Instructors said it was perfect. No cadet, no species, no army had ever completed it. The Velis defense scenario was the galaxy's ultimate test of command and endurance, a simulated siege against an unending alien horde. Thousands of cadets had fought, died, and been reset here for generations. No one had ever won. Not once. Until Earth's cadets arrived. The command amphitheater was filled with the hum of alien voices. Species from across the Union watched from the viewing tiers: tall, glass-skinned Ilran, iron-armored Rovak, and the feathered, hawk-eyed Tellurians. Their eyes all turned toward the small, dark-uniformed figures standing at the base of the holostage. 6 humans. They didn't look like much, lean, scarred, and oddly relaxed. Their uniforms were unpolished, their boots scuffed. But there was something in their eyes that silenced the crowd, that cold, assessing stare of predators who had grown up somewhere far more dangerous than any simulated war. The alien observers whispered among themselves. They call them Deathworlders. Primitive species from a toxic world. How can primitives compete in our siege simulation? Colonel Threx, the Tellurian overseeing the exercise, flared his feathers in irritation. Enough chatter, he barked. His voice echoed in the dome. Cadets of Earth Command Academy, you are aware of the parameters? The lead human stepped forward. Her name tag read, Lieutenant Cadet Ava Monroe. She didn't salute, not yet. She simply looked up at the towering alien officer and nodded. Yes, sir. Break the siege. Threx's feathers rustled in annoyance. That is an oversimplification. You will find the task impossible. This scenario has run for 112 cycles without completion. It is meant to. Monroe cut him off, tone flat. Understood, sir. When do we start? The colonel blinked. Immediately. You have a maximum of 6 hours. Won't need that long, said Cadet Mason Harlow, a broad-shouldered man from the Appalachians, cracking his neck like he was stepping into a bar fight. Laughter rippled through the alien audience. Primitive confidence, they thought. How quaint. The simulation chamber sealed. The world around the 6 humans materialized, a city under siege, endless trenches, the roar of artillery that never ceased. The ground quaked as mechs trudged through ash-choked streets. Plasma storms rolled across the horizon. The system's AI spat out combat reports every second, casualties high. Ammunition low. Enemy unrelenting. Thousands of previous cadets had tried to defend this city, but the enemy always overwhelmed them. The simulation was designed to crush morale. To teach despair. To break minds. The 6 humans stood on a shattered balcony overlooking the battlefield. Monroe squinted into the dust storm. All right, listen up, she said, her voice steady, calm, the kind of calm that comes from living with daily catastrophe. Harlow shouldered his rifle. What's the play, Lieutenant? Monroe smirked. Same as always. Find the head, cut it off. Chain of command, asked Cadet Jean Alvarez, their tech specialist, already patching into the simulation's calm net. Yours truly, Monroe said. And don't wait for orders. You see a chance, you take it. They all nodded. No hesitation. Then Monroe said quietly, remember, this is their impossible scenario. Let's make it impossible for them. The aliens in the amphitheater watched as the humans moved. At first, they thought the cadets were acting recklessly, abandoning defensive lines, leaving strongpoints, sprinting through enemy fire. The Tellurian analysts muttered warnings. They're breaking formation. They're compromising their own defense. But then something strange happened. Everywhere the humans went, the simulation's metrics shifted. Enemy density plummeted. Static patterns in the AI's attack formations began to collapse. The humans weren't reacting, they were hunting. Monroe and Harlow led an infiltration through the sewer system, bypassing the outer defense entirely. Gene Alvarez located the control nodes of the Siege AI, spotting a vulnerability no alien mind had ever noticed: a predictable algorithm that recycled enemy spawns through a single command nexus. While the alien cadets of other worlds would spend months fortifying trenches, the humans cut straight for the brain. "Got it," Alvarez said. "Nexus located about 4 clicks west." Monroe's lips twitched. "Then that's where the party's at." They moved like predators in a forest. Through smoke and rain and collapsing buildings, they advanced with perfect, wordless coordination. They used debris as traps, improvised explosives from fuel cells, redirected artillery drones to hit their own siege engines. Every motion was instinctive, born not from training manuals, but from generations of survival on a world that killed the week before breakfast. At one point, Cadet Logan Pierce ripped a metal shard from his arm and kept moving. "Bleeding's fine," he grunted. "Means we're still alive." Monroe just replied, "Then let's make sure it means something." When they reached the enemy nexus, they didn't waste time. The structure loomed like a spire of glass and metal, pulsing with alien light, the heart of the simulation's endless siege. Other species had fought for years to reach this point. The humans did it in under 12 minutes. Monroe pointed to the base. "Demo charges." Harlow was already setting them. "How big?" She gave him a grin. "Big enough to make the instructors choke." They rigged the explosives, synced them with Alvarez's interface, and withdrew behind the wreckage of a burned-out mech. The timer blinked, 10 seconds. Monroe looked around at her squad. "Good work, everyone." The explosion wasn't cinematic. It was surgical. A blinding flash, then silence. The battlefield sound collapsed, enemy signals flatlined, air support vanished, and the entire simulation froze mid-frame. In the amphitheater, the alien audience stood in stunned silence. Colonel Threx's feathers drooped. The command screens all flashed the same message. Scenario terminated. Human unit achieved objective in 14 minutes, 27 seconds. The hall was dead quiet. Then, slowly, a low murmur spread through the crowd: disbelief, awe, fear. Monroe's voice crackled through the calm feed, calm as ever. "Requesting debrief, sir. Siege is over." Threx stared at the screen. "You ended a century-long simulation in 14 minutes. Monroe shrugged. "You said it was impossible." "We just disagreed." The colonel swallowed hard. "How?" Her eyes were cold steel. "Simple. We stopped playing defense." Silence hung over the amphitheater like the pause between heartbeats. Dozens of alien officers, strategists, and observers stood frozen before the giant tactical display, eyes flicking between the human cadets, now standing casually amid the ashes of their simulation victory, and the flashing readout that refused to change. "Mission complete. Siege duration, 14 minutes and 27 seconds. For a century, the siege scenario had been the Union War Academy's great equalizer, an unsolvable puzzle meant to humble even the most brilliant commanders. And now, 6 humans, barely out of their teens, had walked through it like it was a training exercise. Colonel Threx's feathers lay flat against his skull, a clear sign of distress. "Reset the simulation," he ordered sharply. "There must be an error." "Simulation integrity verified," replied the AI assistant. "No anomaly detected." The colonel turned to his aides, voice rising. "Then explain to me how 6 unranked Deathworlder cadets did in minutes what entire planetary fleets could not." None of the alien officers answered. Because deep down, they'd all seen it. The humans hadn't fought the siege. They'd ended it. Like the entire scenario was just an inconvenience in their way. Inside the debrief chamber, the humans waited silent, unbothered, still streaked with dirt and synthetic blood. Ava Monroe sat at the metal table, tapping her finger idly against the surface. Mason Harlow leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Gene Alvarez had his datapad open, scrolling through the simulation logs with mild amusement. "Looks like we broke their toy," Alvarez murmured. "AI's still looping error messages." Monroe didn't smile.
We weren't here to make friends. Yeah, Harlow said, but I didn't expect this much drama over a win.
They'll call it cheating, said Cadet Logan Pierce, bandaged and scowling.
Always do when they don't understand something. Monroe finally looked up.
Then we'll help them understand. The door hissed open. Colonel Threx entered with 2 aides, his talons clicking against the floor. He stared at the humans for several long seconds before speaking. Cadets, he said tightly, what you accomplished was unprecedented.
However, your methods are in violation of standard tactical doctrine.
You abandoned defensive positions, refused to coordinate through the command hierarchy, and engaged in what we classify as high-casualty operations.
Harlow grunted. That's one way to describe winning. Threx ignored the comment. Explain your logic. Monroe stood. Sir, the siege scenario is designed around attrition. It expects the defender to endure until the system breaks them. That's not war. That's suicide by bureaucracy.
The colonel's feathers flared.
It's strategy.
No, Monroe said evenly.
It's cowardice dressed up as strategy. You built a system that assumes the enemy can't be beaten, so you just teach people to die slowly. On Earth, that's called losing. Threx's eyes narrowed. And you believe your primitive instincts are superior to a century of Union tactics? Monroe tilted her head.
You built your tactics for safe worlds, places where the weather doesn't kill you, where food doesn't fight back, where peace is normal.
We come from a planet that's tried to kill us since birth.
Everything we have, our muscle, our mind, our fear, it's all sharpened by survival.
You put us in your war, and we treat it like a thunderstorm. You wait it out. We end it.
The colonel said nothing for several moments. Then, with a tight motion of his wing, he gestured toward the observation deck.
Then perhaps you can demonstrate your philosophy once more, he said. The Union Command Council has authorized a secondary test. Monroe glanced at her team. Another simulation? Threx's beak clicked. Not a simulation. A live joint operation. 2 hours later, the cadets stood aboard the UCS Meridian, an orbital cruiser positioned above a live combat exercise zone.
Below them stretched the shattered remains of an abandoned mining colony, now a live-fire training ground for Union elite forces. A swarm of drones patrolled the canyons, programmed with adaptive AI based on real enemy species. Each generation of drone learned from its own destruction. For 10 years, no cadet team, alien or otherwise, had managed to secure the colony's reactor hub.
Mission parameters are simple, said Threx through the comb. Secure the hub, eliminate all hostiles. You will be competing against 2 other cadet units from Rovac and Tellurian academies. Harlow smirked.
So we get to scare the neighbors now.
Monroe said nothing.
She looked down at the terrain map, a maze of cliffs, tunnels, and drone nests. Then she smiled faintly.
All right, Deathworlders. Let's remind them why no one picks a fight with gravity.
The drop pods launched like bullets. 6 streaks of fire cut through the clouds and slammed into the canyons below. The humans hit the ground running, armor hissing, rifles live. Dust swirled around them as they fanned out, moving with terrifying precision. The alien cadets, observing through the shared combat feed, watched in disbelief as the humans didn't even pause to assess. They were already dismantling the battlefield's logic. Alvarez hacked drone control nodes mid-combat, turning enemy turrets against each other.
Pierce used explosive decompression charges to drop entire cliff faces on ambush points. Monroe and Harlow moved like twin storms, one clearing the front lines, the other marking targets for orbital strikes. Within minutes, Union analysts realized the humans weren't playing the scenario at all. They were rewriting it.
Sir, one Rovac officer muttered, staring at the feed.
They're sacrificing their flanking units. Threx growled. No. They're baiting the drones into line of fire.
A flash, then a canyon collapsed, taking the entire enemy swarm with it. At the center of the colony, the reactor hub flickered into view, surrounded by 3 converging forces, the humans, the Rovac cadets, and the Tellurians. It was supposed to be a tactical standoff.
Instead, Monroe's team moved first. Phase 2, she said, voice calm in the comms. Alvarez triggered an EMP pulse that fried every sensor in the area. In the blinding static, the humans disappeared from every feed. When the sensors cleared, the hub was already secure. Human flag on the reactor core, drones offline. Elapsed time, 9 minutes and 32 seconds.
In the control chamber, chaos erupted. The Rovac commander slammed a clawed fist into the console.
They cheated again. Colonel Threx didn't answer.
He just watched the playback, frame by frame, as Monroe's team used every environmental hazard, every fragment of the terrain, every variable the system designers had overlooked.
No cheats. No errors. Just brutal, instinctive efficiency. Threx spoke quietly. They don't think like soldiers. They think like predators. When the humans returned for debrief, Monroe finally saluted. Objective complete, sir.
Threx studied her face for a long time.
You've made your point, he said at last. But tell me, what is the rule you follow, if not ours? Monroe met his gaze. Rule 1, survive. Rule 2, win so fast they never get to Rule 1. Threx exhaled slowly.
Your world must be terrifying.
Monroe's expression softened just slightly. That's one word for home, sir. The debrief hall was packed to capacity. Representatives from 27 species filled the tiered amphitheater: generals, admirals, scientists, politicians.
The air shimmered with tension and disbelief. For the first time in living memory, the Union's entire military council had been called to witness a training debrief. On the central dais stood 6 humans, the so-called Deathworlder Cadets of Earth Command Academy. They wore no medals, no polished insignia, only the standard combat black streaked with dust and oil. Their eyes swept the crowd without fear, without arrogance, only the detached watchfulness of apex predators in a cage of diplomats. The silence was broken by Admiral Corvath of the Rovac Dominion, his steel-blue armor reflecting the hall's light.
This cannot stand, he thundered.
Their performance violates every rule of engagement. Their methods were barbaric. Colonel Threx, feathers sleeked flat beside the human contingent, said quietly, and yet they worked. The Admiral's talons dug into the railing. They obliterated centuries of doctrine. No coordination, no chain of command, no adherence to procedure. Monroe's voice cut through the chamber.
Because procedure is what gets people killed. Every head turned. The humans didn't flinch.
You designed your wars to be clean, Monroe continued.
Predictable.
But war isn't a chess match, it's chaos, it's hunger, it's fear that keeps you moving when your body wants to quit. You build soldiers to follow orders.
We build them to adapt.
Her tone was quiet, almost respectful, but it carried like gunfire in the hushed hall.
The Union's prime commander, a translucent Ilran named Vieshira, finally spoke. Lieutenant Monroe, you are aware of the implications of your statement? You accuse this council of weakness. Monroe shook her head. No, ma'am. I'm saying you've forgotten what survival costs.
Vieshira's voice was like wind over glass.
And what, precisely, does survival cost to a Deathworlder? Monroe hesitated, then said, everything you're not willing to give.
A murmur rippled through the crowd. At the back of the chamber, the projection screens replayed the cadets' 2 victories, the impossible siege, the live-fire operation. Every analyst had dissected them for days.
Every theory failed. No anomaly. No trick. No violation of the simulation framework. Just 6 humans doing what humans did best, turning hell into routine.
Union intelligence reports had gone further, detailing Earth's conditions. The gravity, the diseases, the predators, the weather patterns. A planet that killed millions each year without malice or intent. A planet that taught its children that comfort was a temporary illusion. To the Union, it was unthinkable that such a world could produce life, much less soldiers. But to the Deathworlders, it was Tuesday. Later that night, the council adjourned for deliberation. The cadets were confined to a glass-walled observation room, not as prisoners, but as curiosities. Through the walls, they could see alien officers whispering, gesturing, arguing. Harlow leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. "They're scared," he said with a grin. Pierce snorted. "Took him long enough to figure it out." Gene Alvarez was still typing on his datapad. "Scared? Nah. They're calculating. They're deciding whether to study us or ban us." Monroe stood by the window, watching the alien officials cluster in bright uniforms like tropical birds. "They'll study us," she said quietly. "That's what they do. Try to make sense of what doesn't fit their world." Harlow glanced up. "You sound almost sorry for em." Monroe didn't answer for a while. Then she said, "They're good soldiers. But they've never had to bury a planet full of bad days. They don't know what it's like to win because losing means extinction." The door hissed open. Colonel Threx entered alone. His expression was unreadable. "They've reached a decision," he said. "Let me guess," Pierce muttered. "We're banned for life." Threx ignored him. "They're commissioning a study task force under your leadership, Lieutenant Monroe. You'll train Union officers in Deathworlder methodologies." Monroe frowned. "You're serious?" Threx nodded. "Completely. Effective immediately." The humans exchanged looks. Alvarez chuckled. "Oh, they're really scared." Threx exhaled slowly, feathers trembling. "You should know something, Lieutenant. Your victory has terrified every strategist in the Union. Not because you're stronger, but because you made war look easy." Monroe met his eyes. "It's not easy, Colonel. It just doesn't scare us anymore." Over the next weeks, footage of the siege break spread across every world in the Union. Instructors paused their lectures mid-sentence to replay it. Recruits watched it in silence. Generals analyzed every movement, every command, every cold, efficient strike. The word Deathworlder stopped being a slur. It became a warning. Rumors spread that the Union Command Council had quietly issued new training directives modeled on Earth tactics, Monroe protocols, they called them. Others whispered that the humans had been offered their own autonomous unit within the galactic defense grid. But the truth was simpler and far more unsettling. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy realized it was not the top of the food chain. On the 47th day after their victory, Ava Monroe and her squad were invited to stand before the Union War Council for final recognition. The hall was silent as VA Shira addressed them. "Cadets of Earth Command Academy," she said, "you have revealed both our strength and our weakness. In your defiance, you reminded us that survival is not found in procedure or tradition, but in the will to live, regardless of the cost." Monroe nodded once. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Granted." Monroe looked around the vast hall, the 1,000 watching eyes, the silent cameras streaming across the stars. "You wanted to know how we ended your century-long siege in seconds," she said. "It wasn't strategy. It wasn't luck. It's because we don't fight for perfection. We fight because we remember what it's like to lose everything. On Earth, that's the only lesson that ever sticks." She paused. "You train soldiers to defend. We raise survivors to endure. That's the difference." VA Shira's crystalline form shimmered with faint light. "Perhaps, the Union has grown too accustomed to safety." Monroe met her gaze. "Safety's just the slowest way to die." The hall fell utterly silent. After the ceremony, the humans walked the long corridor back to the transport bay. Through the transparent ceiling above, the stars of the Union glittered, cold, perfect, and far away. Harlow let out a low whistle. "So what now, Lieutenant? We just go home?" Monroe smiled faintly. "Home's wherever someone still needs to learn how to survive." Alvarez looked up. "They'll never look at us the same again." "They shouldn't," Pierce muttered. "We're not the same." Monroe stopped at the end of the corridor, turning back toward the galaxy that had finally noticed them. Her voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. They spent 100 years teaching people how to survive a siege, she said. We showed them how to end one. That night, the stars above Velis 9 burned brighter, or maybe it only seemed that way, because every mind that looked up at them now understood something terrible and beautiful about humanity.
The Deathworlders didn't come to conquer.
They came to remind the universe that peace, like war, was only ever temporary.